Hello, and welcome to Cause and Effect, the podcast where we talk about how you can live and lead well so you can have the impact you want without burning out. And I wanted to think today about what you're putting off for one day. Because most of the leaders I work with have some sort of version of this. One day when things calm down, they'll get back to running. One day when this funding bid is in, they'll start cooking properly again. One day when they're less busy, they'll see their friends more. And some of the leaders I've worked with have said something that stayed with me. They've told me quite directly that they see themselves maybe having 3, maybe 5 years more in the service. And that's when their life will really begin. Not now, later, when all of this is done, because you can't lead a charity and have a full life. What if your one day arrives and you've forgotten what it was you were waiting for? What if one day never comes? And I think this is really important that we think about what it looks like when work has become your whole identity. Because you started this work with passion, with excitement and energy, and you were really committed. But it's that commitment which can shift passion and purpose into identity. And gradually, over time, that commitment has shifted the job you do into who you are. And when someone asks what you do for fun, you hesitate. When you try to picture what you'd do if you weren't in this role, it's really hard to imagine. The job has expanded to fill everything: your time, your headspace, and your sense of self. And it can leave you feeling guilty for doing things for yourself. Taking an evening off feels indulgent. Going on holiday without checking emails feels selfish or even neglectful. Saying no to something that isn't urgent feels impossible. And there's always that quiet voice that says, someone needs this. The work matters. This can't wait. Because ultimately, when you're leading a charity, the buck stops with you and you need to get the job done. And this is borne out in research. So charity leaders are working on average an extra 10 hours a week unpaid. That's 10 hours taken from somewhere else, from rest, from relationships, from the parts of life that remind you who you are beyond the role. And underneath all of it, there is a worry that often doesn't get named. What happens when work ends? What happens when you retire? If you're made redundant, you have a period of ill health. Who are you then? Who would you be if you didn't work in the charity sector? If the work is your identity, losing it isn't just losing a job, it's losing yourself. And I think it's really important we think about why this happens, and I think there are a number of factors. The first one is that when our work is meaningful to us, it can almost feel as if it's a calling, and that calling can create a particular type of vulnerability. Because when our work is meaningful, it connects to our values and our sense of purpose, that desire to make a difference. It doesn't feel like work does for some other people, perhaps in a standard 9 to 5. It feels like something that's more than just a job. And usually that is a good thing for our well-being. But it can also mean that the boundaries between work and self become blurry. And you don't just leave the job at the door, you carry it with you all the time, because it's not just a job, it is a part of you. And this places you at risk of work becoming your everything if you're not vigilant to it. Second of all, I think the sector really reinforces this. The norms of the charity sector celebrate dedication, being responsive, and sacrificing for the work. And the charitable aims, the needs of the communities you serve, the needs of your teams, that shared sense of purpose among your colleagues, all of it creates a pull towards giving more. And when you're surrounded by people who feel the same way, it's very hard to step back and say, actually, I need to protect something for myself. Third, I think there is a guilt that goes alongside that makes it almost impossible to change. And we don't talk about this often enough, I don't think. You know that you and probably the rest of your team need better boundaries, that you need life outside work, that you need to prioritise your needs, that your development and well-being are important. But when you try to focus on these, you start to feel guilty. And along with that might come some anxiety, and you find yourself pulled back into the other work because the discomfort of stepping back feels worse than the exhaustion of staying and just getting more done. Because it's more than just setting boundaries and focusing on yourself. It's about shifting how you view your work and yourself, and how you deal with those thoughts and emotions that come up. And so, as I say, we all know we need better boundaries. We all know we need a line between life and work. But how can we actually achieve that? It's really important for us to think about what are the practical steps. And it's important to say that the aim here isn't about caring less about the work. That passion for your work is really important, and it shouldn't be that you can't care about it. But it is about expanding who you are beyond it so that work becomes part of your life rather than all of it. We want you to get to the point where you're not questioning whether it's work or you, but you can feel like it's work and you. But this means thinking about this before you're at the point of exhaustion or crisis, because once you're burnt out or close to it, it's really hard to get yourself out of that place. So the earlier we can start this work, the earlier we can shift this way of thinking, the better for you. So first of all, it's really important to remember that making a difference means taking care of you. When you're so used to putting work and everyone else before you, it becomes automatic. But you need to remember that to lead well and to be able to be strategic, to problem solve, to be effective in your role, you need to look after your energy and resilience. Knowing this and regularly reminding yourself of this can really help you reframe that thought of time for you is selfish to time for me makes me a better leader. And this is really, really important. 2, we need to try and hold the work more lightly. So this starts with noticing when you're thinking about work outside of hours, the guilt when you stop working, what you're telling yourself about what a good leader looks like when you immediately step in to help. Now, the goal isn't to eliminate those thoughts or feelings or those desires to help and make a difference. It's to create a bit of distance from them, which enables you to evaluate whether you really need to do more right now, whether something is urgent or whether it can be postponed or delegated. And this means you start to respond, and you stop reacting. Gets you out of that firefighting state and feeling more control. But beyond this, when you hold on to something too tightly, there's no space for it to breathe, for it to grow, so it gets crushed. If you hold things a bit more lightly, it can take up the space it needs to, but there's room for more, and we can create a bit more balance. 3rd, I want you to think about getting comfortable with uncomfortable emotions. When we start to try to create boundaries, when you close your laptop on time, when you say no to something, when you take a proper lunch break, guilt and anxiety can show up. You can have thoughts about not being a good enough leader, not being committed enough, not being dedicated enough. And that's normal. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. But we are used to trying to get rid of emotions and thoughts which we find uncomfortable. We push them down, we try to ignore them, and by doing so, we make them worse. If you think about a child who's trying to get your attention, if you ignore them, they only get louder, try harder, and our thoughts and emotions can be like that. So instead of trying to make those feelings go away, we want to accept them for what they are, to sit with them and get used to some of that discomfort, and then we can choose to do the thing we want to do anyway. And over time, that discomfort is going to reduce, but we have to go through that, not around it. We can't avoid it and we can't get rid of it. 4, it's really important to think about where you find meaning and purpose outside of work. It could be in your relationships, it could be in opportunities for creativity, learning, achievement, your community, spirituality, your hobbies, whatever it is, it reminds you that you are a person, not just a leader. And if you're not sure where else you find meaning and purpose, that's important information, and it might be that the work has been filling that space for so long that you've genuinely lost touch with what else does. And so if that's the case, ask yourself which activities, people, hobbies, communities have brought you meaning, pleasure or joy in the past, or where you've used your strengths, and use these as a starting point to explore where you might want to focus time outside of work now. And 5, I want you to start building one day now, not when things calm down, not when the sector changes, not in 5 years when you retire, now. Identify one thing you've been putting off, one friend you've been meaning to catch up with, one hobby you want to restart. It doesn't have to be big, but it has to be real. It has to be important to you, because one day has a habit of staying exactly where it is in the future unless you make a deliberate choice to start living it today. Think about it. How many times have you promised yourself you'd do the thing and you still haven't? So let's think about the bigger picture. You're not just your job title. You are certainly not just your charity. You are not the cause, however much you care about it. You are a person first. And the most sustainable, effective version of leadership comes from a life that is full, not from a life that's been sacrificed to the difference you want to make. The leaders I work with who find their way back to themselves, who start building a life that exists alongside the work, don't do it by caring less or being less dedicated. They do it by accepting that it doesn't have to be either or, that thinking about themselves isn't selfish. So don't keep saying one day, start saying now. So that's it for today. If you liked today's episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share this with someone you think needs to hear it. And if you think I might be able to help you or your organisation, do get in touch. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.